I see you don't mind just waiting for a couple of minutes. So we'll just start the webinar in 2 minutes, if you don't mind, because I guess a few people would need some extra time to join. But in the meantime, feel free to write down in the chat box, introduce yourself, tell us, your name, your organization, or maybe the country you're from. So it'll be lovely to get to know who is there, especially for our esteemed speakers today. So feel free to use the chat function. Let us know where you're from, who you are. Thank you, Fayaz. Fayaz from Pakistan, meal specialist. Likewise, it's good to see you. And 54 people. I think we're good enough to move forward, but maybe, just start in a minute or so. Ziad from Palestine has created as we. Hi, Ziad, welcome. Irina from Kiev, Ukraine. Michaela from Germany. Wow. Egypt. Doria. Sabrina from Canada. Anton from Albania. Wow. Anton, are you in Albania or you're from Albania?
From Albania and in Albania now. In January,
Albania.
God knows where.
Wow. Fantastic. And we have Kasun from Sri Lanka and Chow from Italy. Hi, Silva. Ghulam Rasool. Okay, if I read the name, it will go on and on and on. But Lebanon, Scotland, Pakistan, Italy. Wow, this is amazing. Thank you very much, guys, for introducing yourself. We are 41 people now, but I'm sure there'll be many more. So with your permission, I'll just start the webinar without further ado. It's a very broad topic, as you can see, and we only have 1 hour in which we have some question and answers, and then also, uh, you know, discussion with the people who are attending the event. It officially closes in 1 hour, but we can certainly have a few more minutes, not very long, because of course the speakers have other things to do as well. So my name is Hur Hasnain. I am the treasurer at the International Evaluation Academy, which is the organizer of today's webinar. Besides, I also founded Pakistan Evaluation Association, and it's been over 2 decades that I'm associated with doing, designing, thinking about, managing, and disseminating evaluation for a variety of organizations. Currently based in Brussels. And today it's my honor to moderate this session on evaluation in the context of fragility, conflict, and violence with 3 esteemed speakers of ours, Khalil Bitar, Engel Elaronson, and Marco Lorenzoni. I'll introduce them a bit more in detail in the next slides. I just want to add a little bit about International Evaluation Academy. Since you guys are here, I'm imagining majority of you already know what the Academy is, but we are a registered charity, an evaluation science academy to promote evaluation for long-term sustainable and transformational change. We're kind of a group of people with evaluation brains, Majority of them are from, have some thorough practical and academic background that does work together to promote evaluation. So our website is in front of you. Please feel free to have a look, explore it, and see the board members, the friends of the academy, and the fellows. Um, this topic today is very close to a thematic interest group. We call it TIG or Ideas TIG of the Ideas, which is a membership-based evaluation association. And I was there, a board member there for 6 years, for 2 terms, and where we established a TIG. So basically, this TIG is a group of evaluators who who you can interact with. We have a listserv. Um, Feel free to join it using this the web address that is in front of you, or just drop an email to me, and then I would easily add you to the group. It's an email listserv, which means you can receive emails what people are thinking. You can ask your questions if you get stuck somewhere in terms of evaluation in war affected or fragile context, which is not one shoe fits all approach. So it's changing context, so things change. So I think it's very useful to have an email listserv where people can ask question if you get stuck somewhere, you're doing an evaluation, managing some things. There are many groups available, but this is very particular and specific to evaluation in fragile and conflict affected areas. The same take, actually, at Ideas, we published this book on evaluation in context of fragility, conflict, and violence. Considering that it's a very important topic, we made it an open access document, so it's available to download as an online copy, free, at Ideas website. But then for those who want to have it printed, you can always go on your closest Amazon store and order it online. So it's only the printing cost. So it would be around between around $15, which is the printing cost. So Ideas is not making any money out of it. So I'll very quickly introduce our speakers today. And it is really an honor and a pleasure to have you, Khalil Bitar, with us, who's an expert in planning, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. He is leading PMEL currently at WIS Academy or WISE Academy. Apologies for my but Khalil, you can correct me, for nature and at the University of Bern in Switzerland. It was a pleasure to meet you in Bern last year, Khalil. And he has recently just been elected as the president of the IOCE, which is the International Organization for Cooperation in Evaluation. It's a worldwide organization, mainly works with the VOPEs, the National Voluntary Organization for Professionalization and Evaluation. And he's also the co-chair of Eval Partners. He's the founder of Palestinian Evaluation Association and the co-founder of the Evaluate Global Network and Eval for Action, both very active groups of mainly young and emerging evaluators. He is active in several national global evaluation initiatives, mainly focusing on equity, social justice, youth and evaluation, and conflict settings. He is a founding trustee of the academy, and he did a lot of work in establishing the website that we have, the social media channels. So we are very proud of that. And then we have our wonderful Inga Lil Aronson, who was one of the co-authors of the book I mentioned earlier. Inga works in museum and cultural heritage at Uppsala University in Sweden. She has a PhD in cultural anthropology at the same university. She is keen researcher on culture, memory, heritage, in a pursuit of trying to understand how those entities can be used in in transformation of society. Currently, earlier this year, she had a new publication called Culture, Heritage, Memory, toward a resonant cultural solution for resettlement. And it is open access. So you can see we work a lot on open access, which is a great thing in today's world where there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation. So having these specialized books and publications available open access is really a blessing. She has really been a humanitarian by heart, and she has been the former director of Network on Humanitarian Action. And then, last but not least, Marco Lorenzoni, also the co-author of the Evaluation in Fragility, Conflict, and Violence book that I presented earlier, and an active member of EvalFC, VIDS TIG. He has more than 25 years of experience, and I have an absolute pleasure, delight, and honor to actually directly working with him. I think that was for a couple of years, which has been amazing. He's retired now, but you can see he's very active still in the evaluation community. He's the board member at the European Evaluation Society. He's doing a lot of writing, a lot of action, and I think it's a wonderful example, and a mentor, I would say, who think that evaluators should also be activists. We should not be just judging the causes and effects, but also raising our voices. So some of the topics that are close to his heart, as you can see, are rule of law, media, human rights development, cooperation. And he has done a lot of work during COVID-19 pandemic. Some of them were like Valley Crisis, and these and then also a lunchtime conference series that he did for the European Commission in about evaluation in hard to reach areas. Um, so I think that's it for Marco. I didn't read it because I know you so well, but I think people can read it from here. And wonderful to see the numbers have actually gone up to 60 now, and I'm sure a lot of them are joining. So I won't delay this, but I don't know where's my screen. Here it is. Okay. Yeah, I can see the numbers are increasing. So let us start. I mean, first of all, again, I'll go back quickly to say we organized this webinar on a very last minute. We wanted to do it before the year ends. And we believe that it's a very important topic because the world we are living in, unfortunately, is going through a lot of crisis, you know, violence, war, conflict, and you name it, and it's around the world. But what does this mean for evaluators? I mean, we are evaluators, and our work is to look at the effects of the interventions that different entities are doing, whether they are civil society organizations, whether they are uh, local entities, the governments, the bilateral aid agencies or multilateral development banks, and etc. But then how can you do it? It's not a straightforward evaluation exercise. There are risks to evaluator, there are risks involved for enumerators, and in a lot of active conflict area, in a war zone and etc., you may not have access to the respondents at all. So how could you bring in judgment on something has either worked or not, or how to do things better in such situations, which are already very fragile. So, okay, anyways, it's not for me to talk. So I would actually ask some questions to our speakers directly, and then others can jump in and add more. And then if you have any suggestions or if you want to add something, please use the chat box or write down your responses. But at the end of the one-to-one questions with our speakers, we'll also open the floor for discussion where you can also talk. I mean, considering we have time for that, for all of you to speak. But then if not, I would say that don't delay. I mean, just write down your questions and we'll try to pick it up. We'll read when we are not speaking. So Khalil, first of all, thank you very much for being with us. You wear several hats and several very important hats. So we are very honored that you took some time out of your busy schedule and you're with us. My question to you specifically would be around some of the primary challenges that an evaluator or an evaluation commissioner should keep in mind before doing an evaluation, before planning an evaluation, or while conducting an evaluation. What are these challenges that we should be aware of while designing, conducting, or disseminating evaluations in fragile and conflict areas? Over to you.
Thanks so much for organizing and for your generous introductions and questions. And I'm very glad to be with you and our fellow panelists, but as well with many friends and colleagues who joined us, took some of their time to join us, and some of them I have worked with, and I know that they are experts on the topic and much more. So very glad to have you. So do you know what is the number of people who live, or the percentage of people who live in this world under fragility, conflict, and violence situation? It's a considerable number. It's 1 in 4, and some estimates say 1 in 3. Touches everybody, many of us from so many different places. Also, and if you allow me, for just a couple of points before I go directly to the challenges, that evaluators face directly. But also, it is important to establish that what we will call now FCV, fragility, conflict, and violence situations, are closely related to each other. So it's difficult to distinguish sometimes what is fragile and what is in conflict and what is in violence. Sometimes it's the three of them, sometimes two of them. So this is very important thing to keep in mind. And also that there's a lot of fluidity. So one country moves from one structure to a category to another. And this whole idea of evaluation, to have certain tools and toolbox that we use, and one size fits all, it's very, very difficult. So one point to establish is how widespread and also how fluid this situation is. And the third one is I want to establish that it is very linked to equity and social justice issues. Inequalities and social injustices are so much affected by FCV situation. Women and youth, for example, they are affected most, but not only, of course, women and youth a lot, and they bear the consequences, but also they are so important in recovery, as we see from so many experiences and studies and so on. And of course, finally, is to say that this or these situations and contexts, they really pose huge, important challenges ethically, methodologically, logistically, and politically for evaluators. And we carry a lot of our shoulder if we want to do this with our ethical responsibility as evaluators. So some of the challenges might be very familiar to a lot of you. I will share from my experience. I worked in Palestine as an external consultant and internally as well, and in the MENA region in Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, in other countries that, on the different categories. And in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, we're lucky to have a lot of every C and V there. So some of the challenges were really security and accessibility. As a Palestinian evaluator, I could not travel to Gaza Strip. I am based in the West Bank. So many other evaluators can travel from one place to another. This is just a simple one to say we cannot access most of the places. Also, there was volatile and rapidly changing context. So you have to really understand what's going on, and you have to be quick, and you have to know sometimes when you do evaluation in very stable environment is completely different. 2 years and a half, I moved to Switzerland to work at the university, and things are different. Things are stable. There are, you can predict what happens. In some of the conflict countries, you cannot even buy your ticket or have your transportation 2 days ago. You need on the spot. So it's very volatile situation. Of course, political sensitivity is a major thing, and we'll come back to this later. But political sensitivity, you have to be very politically sensitive. And one of the most important point to me is also the ethical and protection aspects. Evaluation can do harm if not done with a protection lens. And the ethical consideration for us as evaluators is very, very important, but especially tested in this context. Of course, also this is related to the cultural aspect where there are culture sensitivity and culture understanding is so important. Perhaps most importantly, although it's important in every context, I would argue, in conflict affected situation. And finally, it is really practical point. Most of the time, evaluation is the last on the priority of people in countries that are seeing unliving, bombardment, genocide. So it is really difficult to prioritize that. So resources are limited, and ca local capacities are really sometimes tested because people move to other countries, people go abroad, or they are afraid to work in this field. So many challenges. I hope we'll have time to discuss some of them as well with the following questions and answers. Back to you, Har. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khalil. Especially, hearing the words from an evaluator that has, practical experience working in such context, belonging to such context, and we understand it's not easy. A lot of emotions go in there, which are natural. I mean, very natural. So, and I'm also thankful that you mentioned the issue around ethics, which indeed is very important. And for us as evaluators or evaluation commissioners, some of us are representing some donor organizations. I think one thing in this respect that we should always keep in our mind is that no accountability measure, whether it is evaluation or data collection for any other reason, research, etc., no such accountability measure should supersede the safety and security of people. So nowadays we are very fond of using fancy evaluation tools and methods, and AI and satellite and etc. See what is feasible. I mean, rather than seeing what is trending. So I think that's a key message that I would like to give, to have ethical, interactions and etc. But anyways, I mean, I think it's a good natural transition to Inga now, who has spent her life studying culture, heritage, and she's a keen researcher and academic from Salah University, and I have the pleasure of working, writing with you a lot of things. So Inga, so when it comes to gathering data, which is the first step before you start writing a report or your judgments. So what strategies would you employ to gather reliable data in such difficult and moving situations? And then my question, considering your background, is that how would you specifically deal with the values issue, like, because these areas where basically there are contest of values, like one value against the another value. How would you deal with that? How would you deal with, like, the association with heritage, culture, which are, next steps coming out of the values they hold. So, like, literally, my question is around how would you effectively and ethically gather data in such situations? Inga, you're mute. If you could kindly unmute yourself.
Mute. Can you see me? I'm half.
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you now as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Her, for your presentation and your questions. And thank you, Khalil, for your insights. I am not a pure evaluator. I am a cultural anthropologist who has followed a resettlement, involuntary resettlement projects for decades. And I'm a cultural anthropologist, and if we are talking about methods, I always come back to ethnography. Ethnography in its different shapes. I believe very much, I think it's even necessary to have a face-to-face communication. But I also realize, excuse me, the issues of security that have become more and more important to consider. It is difficult to do ethnographic fieldwork today compared to, for example, 30 years ago. Much more dangerous today than before. And when I have been dealing with culture my whole professional life, I have educated master students in heritage, memory, in conflict areas. And the definitions of those kinds of areas in conflict areas are contested sites. So there are always tensions between one group or the other group about this contested site, culture heritage site, or the memories surrounding it. So the methods are, I don't have the solution to that. But I'm stressing ethnography in its classic sense. And now with the modern technologies, we are entering into another kind of gathering of data that I'm concerned with, because I think that there is a barrier between the digitalization of gathering of data and the face-to-face discussion. There will never be there will never be a substitute to this face-to-face conversation. In anthropology, we call it the long conversation. The long conversation that make it possible to try to understand another human being in another culture environment. Culture sensitivity is not enough. We need to dig deeper, much deeper than culture sensitivity. So I am elaborating now with the method of performance theory, because one of the problems of heritage, memory, and culture, especially then in these sensitive environments, fragile environment, is to capture presence. How do we capture presence? And I think that performance theory and methods might help us to structure the ethnography at a certain moment in time, because the presence, to capture the presence, is also to identify transformation. And in performance theory, the material object can be captured, but also the body in the space. And this sounds very philosophical and difficult maybe, and a little bit, what is she talking about? And I understand that. But still, the soft culture values are we interested in, because those are sometimes more important than the economic material values that rather easily can be mapped. And these soft cultural values are not always obviously related to a certain project. And those soft values, intangible values, are difficult and are seldom visible in these formal interviews or questionnaires. And with the technology, with the distance, with the technology, it becomes even more distance and difficult to capture the presence of people. Rituals is one of those situations where we can record, map, observe the presence. And with it, those soft values, cultural values. So face-to-face ethnography. And we need to deal then with the ethical issues of contested sites, where groups have experienced tension between a certain site. Jerusalem is one of these classical cases of a contested site. So if I will stop there with the methods, we can continue the discussions of values and culture, heritage, memory as a package, because that will also be a possibility to use as a package within an evaluation.
Indeed, and yeah, thank you very much, Inga. That's indeed very useful, although a bit philosophical, but very important point for us to understand as evaluators who are engaged in measuring in such kind of context where the values are contesting with each other, and to understand context, that is the biggest message that we give, and then that's the main point of the book, ideas book that we mentioned earlier, Evaluation in Fragility Context. It's a key point, and allow me to say that you and I, along with Inder Naidu of IFAD, are working on this topic on a book that we aim to bring in the next couple of years. So yeah, I mean, thank you very much for that. And I think that naturally leads us to Marco Lorenzoni, who has done a lot of work around learning and has a learning and sharing. So Marco, it's been years and years that we are just talking about, okay, evaluation in conflict affected areas, evaluation in pandemic like COVID-19 recently, where you worked very hard in pushing that crisis initiative, a lot of podcasts, a lot of videos, lessons learned paper, and you name it. So when do you think we will actually learn from these things? And I mean, specifically mentioning, circular learning to foster resilience and adaptation in such contexts. Yeah, over to you.
Well, thanks very much for the wonderful introduction. Thanks for organizing this, and it's so nice to see so many friends and colleagues here participating. And it's not easy to take the mic after Inga and after Khalil and their very inspiring words and the experiences they share. But you mentioned something that is very dear to my heart, the concept of continuous learning, of circular learning. And I think it goes hands in hands with another concept, which is cross-fertilization. Okay, so the capacity of different words to contaminate positively each other in the sharing of experience. And I think those two terms very much match with the field we are talking about. So the evaluation in fragile and conflict affected areas or communities. If we look at the experiences that were made in evaluating in situation of fragility, the first evaluation community that started to intervene on this were the humanitarian guys. So people evaluating in humanitarian context that they were faced with the huge problems. At that time, back in the last century, the technology did not help that much. And it was extremely difficult for them to intervene in such difficult contexts. So they started developing different methods with time constraints that were completely different from the time constraints that other people intervening in more, let's say, secure or stable situation didn't know yet. And so they started to develop tools and methods. And the situation started to change a bit about in mid 2010s when we have the first evidence that also evaluators from development cooperation started to learn from humanitarian evaluators based on their experience. We saw some first publications that emerged in 2015, 2016, on using similar techniques for monitoring and evaluation, but applied to a development cooperation context. The world was changing. So the situation of fragility and violence, unfortunately, spread over the world. And so even several countries that were traditionally stable had started to experience the same troubles as in humanitarian context. And then COVID happened. And the entire world, we all realized that the entire world became an hard-to-reach area. So all evaluators started to adapt and to learn very quickly, very rapidly from humanitarian guys, from development cooperation evaluators, what they already were using in situations of fragility or violence. indeed, the very fast technological development helped a lot, from satellite monitoring to online platforms like Zoom that we are using here now on this context. And a lot was done, a lot was achieved, but many mistakes were also made. And some of these mistakes have been analyzed following this experience, maybe not all of them. So far, the virtuous cycle of cross-fertilization, as I see it. But in terms of continuous, of circular learning, what else should we focus on? And I just would like to envisage three different questions, three different open questions or avenues for reflection. The first is, did the world of evaluation, the world of social research, learn all they could learn from each other when intervening in context of violence and fragility? When we launched in 2020, together with Ur and other colleagues and friends, the initiative for the European Commission Evaluation in Crisis, I was struck by the fact that there were no real connections between those worlds, but we were facing the same need. We had to reach people, we had to do field work, we had to interview people. So what we can learn from each other, let's not forget that as evaluators, we really have to never forget that we learn at the beginning of our profession methods and tools from the world of social research. So, okay, so this is my first question. What else could we learn, and what else and how those two worlds can be permeable with each other? The second question is more for donors. Okay, so one key learning point, and Kyle was very clear about this, but also Inga, one of the key points of learning from evaluation in situation of fragility and evaluation during the pandemic was the need for flexibility, absolute flexibility in terms of design, planning, methods, and tools. Okay, how did the donor processes adapted to those needs? How do the processes of donors look like now compared to what they were looking in 2015, 2016, before the COVID crisis? Are there any relevant changes? What spaces for adaptations are now available when intervening in this context? And the third reflection, just really a stone in the water I would like to launch, is about the use of tools. Is the evaluation world continuing to analyze not only the advantages, but also the disadvantages, the negative effects of the use of remote evaluation techniques? Inga was very clear on this when she mentioned the face-to-face versus the online possibility to interview people, but there are many other examples. What negative effects can bring with them some remote evaluation techniques or some remote tools? And this both at the level of risk for the interviewees, risk for the interviewers, and at the level of bias in results. So let me give you just three very, very simple examples. The first, digital divide. Come on, I mean, we stopped talking about digital divide in 1990, but digital divide is still there. Maybe it's not as much technologically as it was at that time, but digital divide is also the capacity for some people to accede to online tools and other people being prevented to use online tools because of cultural barriers, because of access, because of cost, and so on and so forth. So when thinking to to use online tools, are we sure we are getting to the right people? Are we sure that we really are getting to the communities we want to go? Or are we building bias on our result based on self-selection processes? This is the first question. The second, the false feeling that with the online interviewing techniques, we can get to everyone. Okay, so apart from the digital divide considerations, but when interviewing a person online, do we know if a person is sitting on the other side of the screen, controlling the person, controlling their freedom to express freely their opinion, or we don't? Other example, there was a mantra during COVID: let's make best use of secondary sources, which is absolutely right. Okay, let's use the secondary sources that are available, but to what extent the validity and the quality of the secondary sources was and is being analyzed when doing meta evaluations. The motto "garbage in, garbage out" is very easy to quote, and it's something definitely that we should consider in order in order to have high quality results and to have updated results. And well, I think this is everything I wanted to mention for the time. I'm very happy to take questions and to continue the discussion now, even with participants. Over to you. Back to you, Hur.
Thank you very much, Marco. Very, very detailed and very useful conversation as always. I mean, I see from your emphasis that indeed digital evaluation tools and resources, and now as we are talking more and more about artificial intelligence and AI-based data gathering, AI-based data analysis and reporting, I think it's more and more important for us to look into this subject. I mean, of course, we do not have direct access to respondents for primary data collection. For example, secondary data doesn't work. But then also we need to be aware of the risks these new tools and methods carry. I mean, we cannot just apply and test things in a situation which is already going through, violence, conflict, and, atrocities. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a key message to our, participants today, and something for us as evaluators to research more on and be confident on the tools and methods we use. I remember in one of the, even for the traditional methods, I remember, I'll be very quick, in Swat region in the northwest of Pakistan, when it was Taliban affected, a group of evaluators use focus group discussion, which is a very tried and tested and traditional method for data gathering in evaluations. But then that didn't end up well. So basically the evaluators did was they put, people with conflicting ideas in front of each other, which went wrong. So you have to be very careful to assess the risks of any of the data collection tool or method that you will use in such context. I think AI could be a topic of our next webinar, certainly, because that's like a broad thing. But then I see we have some questions in the chat box. So I think considering that we have very limited time left, I'll move to the chat box, which are some questions for you guys. And then also, if you have more questions, please write them down in the chat box, because even if we don't cover it now, I can send it to the speakers and we can get a response from them, which we can maybe publish later on. So please don't hold on to your questions, write them. I mean, as Inga was mentioning earlier, we do not have answers to all the questions. We are just a collective, people who work on these areas. And, when we discuss our issues together, there'll be different options for us to look at when we are designing or implementing evaluations. So we have Kasun from Sri Lanka, and he's saying, I have one clarification about the policy level intervention. Okay, that's very good, high level. Policy level intervention in fragile context and post-conflict situation. What are the things or steps to ensure for implementing a proper policy evaluation for enhancing reconciliation process to lead uprooting root cause of the conflict? So here the discussion goes at the policy level. I mean, indeed, very important, and to address the root causes. Who amongst our esteemed speakers would like to go first, answering Kasun?
Or we can take a step at that. Just a couple of points very quickly. You know the saying in politics, they say it's economy stupid, meaning that the most important aspect is economy. I think in evaluation in FCV context, it would be it's power stupid. That the fact that power is so essential. And this is for evaluators to consider. It will be very important. So one of the first thing evaluators should consider as steps is to do mapping of an analysis of the power there, especially when it comes to policy. And the other point I would mention is also the humbleness. I mean, you guys an evaluator to do a policy evaluation in post-conflict or in conflict setting and spend 1 week, and then you have these huge findings, And so the question is, whose data validity and reliability when you really did 1 week or 2 weeks review and you call it, and you very, very powerful, you have powerful conclusions and findings. So that's also something that is very important. Of course, there is a lot of literature on the steps, but at the same time, we have to question ourselves to question this whole notion of using the old, between two brackets, tools to evaluating new context and changing context, or stable tools for. We have to also consider, which is related to this point, is the serious issue rather than it's become sometimes overused now, this whole issue of decolonializing evaluation tools and methods and what we use. Don't go over it like that, because there's sometimes too much written about it and it becomes empty words sometimes, unfortunately. But decolonializing the tools that you use in evaluation and policy evaluation, if you may, it is also very important to consider here. And finally, just to end with saying, just think about, as evaluators, our role as well. Sometimes if you're silent in a situation where there's power struggle or injustice or inequity, you could actually adding to that, doing harm. So I think the final point is to move from this whole mentality of doing no harm, and we all say, but also to doing good and really contributing in a significant way. If you go again and use the OECD DAC criteria, exactly the same criteria, same tool, the same how it is, and not really have anything that is specific to the FCV context, then also you are adding, you're taking resources from the region or the place you're going, but you're taking other resources. Sorry if it's not directly answering your question about policy evaluation. It's more generic, I think, or more general than just policy evaluation. But the first point about the politics and understanding the power, I think I found it always very useful. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you, Khalil. And I think what you just said reminded me in conflict sensitivity that they say anybody or any organization that intervenes in a conflict situation automatically becomes party to it. So if you are working in a conflict situation, or even if you are, going there for some other reasons, you automatically become part of that process. So be aware of that. I think I'll move on. There are some other questions as well, and Oh, Inga, you have something to say? So sorry, please.
Very interesting question about policy. And in the article that you mentioned about culture, heritage, and memory, we looked briefly at the World Bank's policy on resettlement. And in that case, in this ESF policy, culture and heritage are ambiguous and instrumental. And that maybe there is a reason for it. Because behind lurks always the symbolic force connected to identity and contested sites in resettlement. Because heritage, memory, and culture can trigger violence. It can fragment as well as unite. So an analysis of culture and heritage and memory in any policy is of great interest here research-wise. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so maybe let's be quick because we have quite a few questions now. But then, as promised, what we can do is we can take these questions, work on these, get some responses, and then maybe come back to you guys. Either we'll see with our wonderful coordinator who's here, Viviana, what is the best way to come back to you, either through emails, or we could also develop a blog post or something and come back to you together with our speakers. So, okay, I'll move on to the next question, which is on real-time evaluation. I think it's a very interesting question. Personally, I mean, I strongly believe in it. So Tim asks, have any of you had experience with conducting real-time evaluation? And if yes, what was your experience? So over to you guys.
Well, personally, no, I don't have any experience on real-time evaluation, unfortunately, because really is something that I have missed during my work in evaluation. But I would like to just to share a reflection, which is common. Which maybe would help two different questions. A question asked by Gulam, how to ensure data reliability and validity when access to communities or participants is limited? And also the other question from Kassoon. And rely on local evaluators. Relying on local evaluator researchers and informants whenever conditions allow and whenever the expertise is available. Get rid of this neo-colonialist attitude for which one expert from Sweden, another from Italy, another from Spain have to travel to Sierra Leone to conduct an evaluation. Is it really needed? But careful to the conditions, okay? So the presence of skills is the first and is really something that everybody understands, but carefully analyze also the consequences in terms of risk for local professionals, risk to their security, to their safety. They remain in the country, they may be subject to threats by political forces, by organized forces, by military forces in some contexts. And there is also another consequence, which is directly related to this, which is what are the consequences in terms of validity of results? And this links to the call that Silva just published on the chat consider evaluation as a process in which evaluators, being them local, being them coming from other countries, being them a mix of different compositions, evaluators plus technical experts, and so on and so forth, dialogue with the main actors of the interventions we are evaluating in the country. And conceptualizing this, conceptualizing the idea that evaluation is a process, and understanding what are the dynamics and the actors within this process is something that really can change a paradigm on how evaluation is conducted and on the usefulness of the results of the evaluation. It's not only a question of giving back the results of the evaluation, but it is a question really of having in place a process, and once again, are donors ready for that, in which the different parts of the evaluation cooperate to achieve the results of the evaluation.
Excellent, Marco. Thank you very much. I will quickly add to Tim that indeed we have used RTEs in our experience, and then I would specifically say that in the context which are affected by fragility and conflict, we saw that RTE are actually very useful, as Marco was mentioning. Using it as a process in the process, because when the situation is fragile, it's rapidly changing and fluid. I mean, you cannot wait for end of the project for evaluation to come and tell you something, because it's already late. There were several examples where we conducted baselines, we gathered data, we did or need assessment, etc., and the population moved. And this is very common because you cannot predict in fragile contexts and conflict-affected contexts. So using real-time evaluations, making sure that evaluation or evaluation tools and methods are integrated within your MEL frameworks is one of the key messages that we give to organizations specifically, or the designers of interventions. And one key learning, I'll be brief here, I see there are very interesting questions and comments, is that, what I learned, that use of outcome harvesting during the life of the intervention has been very helpful, because outcome harvesting, look, retrospectively, it's more open rather than targeting the, indicators and lock frames and theories of change, you name it. And Khalil and Marco did touch upon the, the decolonizing the sector or evaluation or intervention. It's very much designed by others. And I'm not saying in 100% of the cases, but I'm saying in majority of the cases, they follow the indicators that are donor priorities, and donor are mainly from the global north. So I mean, if they are co-designed, yes. But then, so I was saying that use of outcome harvesting has been very helpful, because it looks at what has changed and why or how. So this gives you a lot of information on adapting the intervention as you move forward. So yeah, I would be a big advocate for that. And thank you for the question. I think I am lost in the chat box now, but I see Silva as okay. One thing, we are already 5 minutes over the time, so our speakers or the participants, I mean, if you want to leave, you're not, you're not obliged to. You're welcome to. But I think we'll not take too much of your time, but we'll be rather quick to conclude it, because we know that you have to go to your regular normal business. But it is so wonderful to see we still have over 50 people available. So it's so, it can tell that, it's your passion that brought you here. So thank you for being with us here, and I think this gives us motivation to actually come back to you later on your questions or comments. with more detail. So but if you want to leave, I mean, feel free to. So Silva, you're saying the issue is not the tools or approach, very much agree, is the perception of evaluation, which now is that report written by some expert consultant that will convey objective truth to donor or manager. We must reclaim the evaluation as a process of learning and mutual accountability enabled. And if we shift the view, we also shift it. I think this is an excellent comment and exactly what I think this is an excellent response to Tim Leslie's question as well, and further to what I was describing. We have another question from Jules, who says, how can we administrate tools in the context of fragility in the rural people? And let me actually read it all, and then maybe we can give the floor to the speakers, and then you can, start answering. Anton, local evaluators have their own bias, which may affect the quality. It's very true indeed. Even the local government statistical bodies, they all. I mean, we are human beings, and organizations have their own values. It is not a value-free field. Okay, I think it will be very stupid to read this all. I'll just open the floor. Anybody, should we just say we conclude in next maybe 10 minutes? So I'll give the floor to our speakers. Please see if any question resonates to you. Please do respond. Considering that there's still almost 50 people here, I see there is interest and people have time. Anton, actually want to say something?
Yeah, no, just a question actually for debate, food for thought. What about, I mean, as you said, we are human beings. We have our own experiences, biases, etc., etc. What about the personal feelings when conducting evaluation or even ROM? I'm a ROM expert as well in fragile contexts. So when you go in the field, when you conduct a certain assignment, you go through your method, approach, etc., etc. But deep inside, we have our own feelings. So for me, I've faced this in a couple of situations, a couple of countries, not many. I was really shocked and moved from certain situations. The feeling that I got is, why I'm writing this? Outputs, outcomes. You see the situation in the field, and it's really disturbing. So for me, sometimes we as evaluators tend to also forget the way how we feel when we conduct our work in the everyday reality in the field. For me, it gives you such a bad taste, So does it really make sense to write a report and send it to a donor? And it's also very much linked to the fact that I'm increasingly becoming doubtful on whether we as evaluators and we as international development practitioners as a whole can actually change something. So it was just a thought, not a question.
Thank you very much. Jules, would you like to add something? But please be brief because we do not have much time, unfortunately. Okay, we can't hear you, Jules.
Hello. Hello.
Hi there. Yes.
Hi to all of you. I'm calling from Africa, from Cameroon. But my question was, maybe you have already answered for my question sometimes, but the matter is this, as we are a bilingual country, we used to speak either in French or either in English. So my English is not more perfectible than French. That was why I was
French, Jules, pas de problème. We have Marco Lorenzoni, who's fluent in French, and many others.
Thank
but
you. Thank you.
Feel free to speak in the language you feel comfortable.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Jules. I'm an agroeconomist engineer. I'm dealing with a rural area. Donc, je fais dans le milieu rural. Et puis, au niveau de la fragilité, quand on parle de la fragilité, à un moment donné, il y a des populations qui sont déjà dans une situation fragile. Et leur fragilité est relative. Ça dépend d'une fragilité économique, d'une fragilité alimentaire ou d'une fragilité statutaire du fait de la politique qui est menée dans le coin. Comment est-ce que l'évaluateur peut, quel matériel l'évaluateur peut donc faire pour pouvoir apprécier le degré de fragilité dans le milieu rural? Et comment est-ce qu'on peut adviser aux politiques l'effet de leur politique sur le milieu rural? That was only my question. Thank you for all the thing, and then I hope to be invited next time, please.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Jules. And I don't know, maybe who would like to go? Marco, I think maybe you are the expert.
Je suis pas extrêmement un expert de la fragilité dans le milieu ruraux, pardon. Mais un petit conseil, c'est justement, comme vous dites, il y a des fragilités qui s'enchaînent les unes sur les autres. Donc, c'est hyper important de les analyser et réussir à comprendre les interconnexions entre les différents niveaux de fragilité et comme une fragilité peut en affecter une autre et empirer la situation finale. Donc, c'est tout à fait correct ce que vous disiez. Au moins, ça, c'est mon opinion. Et je pense qu'il est indispensable d'analyser les fragilités dans lesquelles on se trouve à opérer. D'ailleurs, une chose très importante que Khalil avait mentionné en ouverture, c'était le fait que même les positionnements de fragilité sont des positionnements mobiles. Il y a des situations dans lesquelles on rentre et on sort de différentes situations de fragilité et les unes peuvent influencer les autres. Oui, donc il n'y a pas deux fragilités qui sont absolument égales les unes aux autres, mais il y a des niveaux de fragilité qui se rassemblent. Les analyser est très important, je pense.
Merci. Merci pour cette réaction.
Merci beaucoup, Jules et Marco. C'est fantastic. Thank you very much. Guys, I think maybe we conclude it here. And I know we still have 40 plus people here. That's wonderful. I wish we had more time, but maybe a good it was wonderful to see so much interest considering this is end of the year. A lot of people have already left for holidays and switched off their mobile phones and computers. It's wonderful to see such a high number and a big interest, and I'm really thrilled. And it certainly shows how important this topic is. So with this note, Silva says, thank you for the needed, the only evaluation, but the whole human enterprise in failing the needs and concern of people affected by it. Yeah, it's so sad, Silva. I mean, even just, you know, reading it makes me a bit sad. And yeah, I mean, let's hope that peace prevails in the world. Let's not stop at just talking about evidence or just gathering evidence and giving it back to organizations or whoever you're writing the evaluation for, but then also making sure that you know, we are as evaluators you know, concerned about these issues, and we try collectively to find solutions who are durable, long-lasting for peace, stability, dignity, and etc. And I think with this note, let us conclude today's talk. Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you very much, Inga. Thank you very much, Khalil. And then everybody that participated, either by listening to us or raising your comments and suggestions in the chat box. Yeah, we're very thankful, but we'll come back to you with maybe a written post or by some means. And in the new year, we'll try to organize further conversations on it. So, you know, we continue to discuss this. Thank you very much. And if you're not in touch before, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Take care and bye-bye. Happy holidays, guys. Ciao.